Have you ever found yourself staring at a huge, messy problem, just feeling completely and utterly stuck? We've all been there. Well, today, we're going to pry open the toolkit that the world's top consultants use to turn that chaos into clarity and transform those complex challenges into real, actionable solutions. Let's get right into it. This quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that feeling of being lost. When a problem is just this big, undefined blob, any effort can feel like you're just wandering around in the dark. But what if you had a map? That's what we're building today. A clear, structured framework so you always know exactly where you're headed.
And here is that map for our journey today. We're going to start by properly defining the problem. Then we'll form a smart guess, a hypothesis. After that, we'll dive into the analysis, and finally, we'll wrap it all up by developing a powerful recommendation. It's a straight line from confusion to conclusion.
Okay, so our first stop is maybe the most important one of all. Step 1, defining the problem. Look, you wouldn't start a road trip without knowing your destination, right? It's the same thing here. You simply cannot solve a problem that you haven't clearly defined first. Think of us as detectives, carefully surveying the scene of the crime before we even think about looking for clues. A fantastic tool for this part of the job is something called the SCQ framework. It is brilliant for getting your thoughts in order. First up, you state the situation. What's the deal? What are the basic known facts? Then you introduce the complication. What's the wrench in the gears, the disruption? And from there, it naturally leads you to the question, the one single focused problem that you actually need to solve.
All right, so as we start to break down that question, we need a golden rule. It's a funny-sounding acronym, MCE. It stands for Mutually Exclusive, Collectively Exhaustive. All that really means is that every piece of the problem fits into one and only one bucket. And all your buckets together cover every single possibility, no overlaps and no gaps. This principle, honestly, is the secret sauce for making sure your analysis is rock solid.
Let's see what not to do. So take a look at this breakdown of the US car market. This is a perfect example of a structure that is not MEIS. See how minivans and sport utility vehicles are their own categories? Okay, but wait a minute. Aren't they also types of light trucks? The categories are all overlapping. It's a mess, and trying to do any real analysis here is pretty much impossible.
Now, let's contrast that mess with this beautiful, clean structure. The problem is simple, my head hurts. You can break it down cleanly. Is the cause physical or is it mental? Okay, if it's physical, is it from something outside my body or inside? See? Each category is totally separate, and together they cover all the likely options. That right there is the power of a MECE structure. It just brings instant, beautiful clarity. And depending on the kind of problem you're facing, you can use a few different kinds of structures. A diagnostic framework, kind of like our headache example, helps you find the root cause. A cause-effect framework is great for tracing what happens if you make a change. If we raise prices, what happens next? And a structural framework is for breaking down a whole system, like mapping out a company's entire supply chain. Just think of them as different camera lenses for looking at your problem. Let's make this all real with a classic business case study. The situation: Kmart is just breaking even, while its competitor, Walmart, is expanding like crazy. The complication: Walmart's sales per square foot are way higher, giving them a massive advantage. And this leads right to our core question. How can Kmart improve its sales productivity? See how that works? SCQ just turned a vague feeling of uh-oh, we're in trouble into a sharp, solvable problem. And that leads us perfectly into step 2, forming a hypothesis. Once the problem is clearly defined, you make an educated guess about the solution. Our detective now has a theory of the case, a prime suspect. Now, this isn't just a wild guess in the dark. It's a focused, specific idea that's going to guide our entire investigation from here on out. So why even bother with a hypothesis? Why not just start digging? Because, my friend, it is the ultimate tool for working smarter, not harder. It keeps your work on target, making sure you're answering the right question. It keeps it minimal so you don't waste precious time boiling the ocean. That's a great consulting term for analyzing everything under the sun. And it makes sure your findings are actually useful and delivered on time. But listen, not all hypotheses are created equal. A good one is specific and you can actually test it. A bad one, well, it might be so obvious that nobody could possibly disagree, or it's impossible to prove or disprove, or it requires you to, boil the entire ocean. For Kmart, a good hypothesis would be something like improving the merchandise layout in high-traffic areas will increase sales per square foot by 15%. It's specific, it's testable, it's actionable. Perfect.
So now we're ready for the fun part. Step 3, executing the analysis. This is the journey itself. Our detective is now hitting the pavement, gathering data, talking to people, and running tests, all to prove or disprove that hypothesis. This is where the real work, the real discovery happens. And I've got a great pro tip for you during this phase. Always have an answer. What does that mean? It means at any given moment, you should be able to give a quick 2-minute elevator pitch on your current hypothesis and what you've found so far. It forces you to constantly boil things down and stay focused on the big picture. Pro tip number 2 is a classic for a very good reason. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. It is so tempting to build these incredibly complex, beautiful spreadsheets and models, but complexity is really risky. It increases the chance you'll make a mistake. And even if it's right, it's really hard for anyone else to understand and actually use. Simple, direct analysis is almost always more powerful. And that brings us to the famous 20-80 rule. So often, you'll find that 20% of your analytical work will generate 80% of the actual insight. The key is to zero in on the analyses that are going to have the biggest impact. Do the quick and dirty work first to figure out where the real action is, and then, and only then, you double down on those high-impact areas. All right, let's try a quick exercise in this kind of good enough analysis. How many gallons of gasoline are sold in the US every year? Now, don't go look it up. That's cheating. Just try to estimate. Are we talking millions, billions, tens of billions? Go ahead and pause here for a sec and give it your best shot. So the answer is in the ballpark of about 70 billion. How in the world could you get close to that? Well, you could estimate the number of cars on the road, guess the average miles they're driven each year, and then estimate the average miles per gallon. Now, your numbers won't be perfect, not at all, but they'll get you to the right order of magnitude. And that's a perfect example of how quick estimation can be incredibly powerful for framing a problem. And all of that hard work brings us to our final destination. Step 4, developing the recommendation. This is where we translate all our analysis and our confirmed hypotheses into a clear, compelling plan of action. This is the big so what of the entire process. A truly great recommendation has 4 key elements. What exactly should be done? A clear, simple statement. Why it should be done? That's the logical argument backed up by your data. When it should happen? The sequence and the timing. And finally, how it should be accomplished, the specific methods and resources you'll need. A recommendation with all 4 of these leaves absolutely no room for confusion. But I want to leave you with one final and really critical piece of wisdom. Your analysis does not give you the answer. It informs your judgment. Like this quote says, data can be a real mess sometimes. The whole point of this structured thinking isn't to get rid of the need for human judgment. It's to make that judgment as sharp, as informed, and as confident as it can possibly be. So as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. What is the one complex problem, maybe in your work, maybe in your life right now, where applying this 4-step structure could bring you some immediate clarity? Take this toolkit, go on, and turn your biggest challenge into your next big success.